We're 99.3. This is Nigeria Info. A very beautiful good afternoon to you. It's 12:30 on the clock, and we hold today, Wednesday, to be worthy of note. My name is Joyce. So glad to have you listening in from wherever you're listening in from. If you remember, I think since Monday, I've been telling you we're going to be looking into some financial gist that made its way into the news, and we needed some expert interpretation. One, because I wanted to guarantee myself, and of course, by extension, you, that there is no need to panic. And you know, many times when the government says something, you're wondering what's their next move, particularly when the news article on dormant accounts, when the news on dormant accounts published about a few days ago, one wondered whether this was a time to run, go pack all your money because the government is eyeing it in some way. And then, of course, there is the very fact that just being alive, your living standard has a direct attachment, direct bearing on financial implications. So whether you look at the financial world, the economic world, you look at the figures, you look at the numbers, you look at your expense, the power of your money, the value of your money, you can see how numbers fly back and forth, and all you know is your money isn't buying you much. Well, today on the show, I have the pleasure, because I must admit, I was thinking this was going to happen via Zoom, so I'm really grateful for him, giving us his presence this afternoon. And you know him. But of course, what would it cost me to reintroduce our guest this afternoon, Bolahan Olajede, on the show this afternoon with us. He's an expert when it comes to the figures, the science of the economics that doesn't make sense to you, and helping you comprehend on every level what the government is doing and if it would in any way affect you. Sir, a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me here. I'm delighted to be here.
Really. And I'm so glad that you're here, because many of the things that have made it in the news in the last 1 week appears to trigger conversation, but worse, I think it also triggers panic. It triggers panic on a broader scale, on a macro scale. It's like, does this government know what they're doing? Why are they scrapping? It appears as though they're just desperate for money, and so they're scraping anything. If they look there and there's money there, they want it. And then they tell us or give us a justification as to why they want it. Now, a very good place to look back at would be about a few months ago. Mr. Wale Edun said, well, we're looking at the pension fund, and we're really eyeing it. And eventually was denied. But of course, that was because experts and pensioners, they're crying out like, don't touch our pension money. You can't use pension money. And I thought, wait, why would the government be looking at pension money? Well, again, they came out to deny it. Now, this time around, let's begin from the news article on dormant account. Now, the CBN is saying that monies in dormant accounts should be forwarded to the Apex Bank for safekeeping. And my mind just goes back to that pension thing. And I'm thinking, oh, wait, it's no longer safe in the banks? Well, according to them, they say it's because it could be susceptible to fraud. So,
which is true.
But
one of the biggest sources of fraud in banks is in dormant accounts, especially internal related frauds. People have noticed that this money has just been there forever. Nobody asks about it. Nobody, do any transaction at that account. So it becomes tempting, and a whole lot of fraud have been done on dormant account. But I am not convinced that dormant account being prone to fraud is the reason why government wants it. This matter is just coming back. It has been around for decades. In fact, the last government, maybe about 3 years ago, tried it as well. But people kicked against it, and it backpedaled. Yeah, that was just about 3 years ago. So it's coming back again. The whole idea is you have all these dormant accounts. For example, for someone like me who probably worked in a number of places, literally when you join new employment, they say open an account with this bank, you open the account. When you leave and go to the next one, they say open an account with this. So even I probably have 6 or 7 of those dormant accounts with some 2,000 here, 3,000 here, there. At some point, more than a decade ago, government has estimated some billions that this money, this so-called dormant account money, was some billions of naira. And what government was saying then was that, look, the banks have the use of this money. They're not paying anybody for it. It is just there, free for them. Now, that free money that the banks have been using, so government is also eyeing it on the other side. To say, look, if it's good enough for the goose, maybe Uganda can also have it. And that you are a corporate organization. We are the public sector. We are in a better position to deal with matters that are of a common good than you are. You are catering to your own interest. But we cater to the interest of everybody. So we are better. So that has laid the foundation for government eyeing dormant account for several years. It is worth billions. There are arguments and counter arguments here and there. Is it because of them being prone to fraud? I don't think that is the issue. The fact is that it is free money. It is there. Nobody is coming for it. So can we make the best of it? I mean, how best can we use that kind of a fund? So it's between. Should
the government be doing that? Or is this just a government power wielding? I mean, the government is wielding power over the state, over the country.
It's government looking for money. Anyhow, it can. Especially in a situation where you need money, you are already tottering on the verge of, running into serious debt crisis. So you are being cautious of how much further debt you want to take on. So you're looking inside. So what else can I do if I'm not going to take on additional debt? So when you get into those kind of situations, you look in every direction, every possible direction. You can get money to reduce your borrowing or to avoid further borrowing.
Is that the best thing to do? Isn't there a better thing to do, like create jobs, establish industries, subsidize export, empower entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship? Man has been crying the last few months over businesses, whether they're locally based or international companies that are situated in Nigeria closing shop, and they need government intervention. Isn't there a better thing to do rather than scrape for pennies? Well, at this point, it's no longer pennies when you look at
it's
the macro implication of all the dormant accounts around and the money's in them.
Yeah. You see, it's neither here nor there. There are solutions that are in time horizons. So some things are not available for I snap my finger and I get it. So some of those measures that you have spoken about now could probably be in our, the tail end of the short term into the medium term before you can begin to feel the effect. But if you want quick money right now, if you want to implement dormant account now and you give the instructions to the bank, you probably can get it all in a month. So that is easier to do, and we always like the easy things. But what I believe we need to do is not just look at easy things, but also plan for the medium term and into the longer term, because we have we don't do that much often, and it is why we are always finding ourselves in this kind of desperate situations that we are today.
Okay, so now there is this other news article, and I was reading the news article on KPMG's website. The federal government of Nigeria is seeking to tax the realized profits from all foreign exchange transactions of banks in 2003 financial year. According to them, they say this measure is contained in the Finance Amendment Bill 2024. The bill provides for a one-off tax of 50% on such realized profits. There are aspects to this. First of all, you're backdating the tax. Banks have closed their books.
They've even paid tax on their profits already.
They've even paid tax on their profit. So what justification does the government... Maybe that's even supposed to be the second question. Maybe the question is, what does this really mean?
It's similar to the other one that we just spoke about. In principle, so let's look at the principle. The principle behind it is to say, look, banks, you have made this huge money that has nothing to do with your efforts. I, the government, changed a policy, and that policy just naturally disposed you to making money. You did not. There was no effort required. So when the foreign exchange policies were made. We saw what happened to the dollar rate, and that has nothing to do with you. So if it has nothing to do, then what the money you have made is extraordinary profit. Now, that same policy that we did, while you made so much money from it, it also hurt a lot of people. It hurt businesses, it hurt individuals. So can we take from that extraordinary profit that you have made, because we are government and we know our business is a common good. We know how better to reallocate these resources from your hand to other people who have suffered by virtue of that our policy. So our policy created opportunity for you to make unusual money. It also created a situation in which some people made unusual losses and suffering. Can we take from you and reallocate to moderate the effect of what has happened? That is the principle behind this. And it's not exactly new. It's also done in the Western countries. For example, in some countries, after COVID, people made so much money from oil. And what some of those countries did was to say, look, the rest of the country is suffering. We just came out of this pandemic, and you guys are posting this obnoxious profit. Can we take some and use it to fix some of the other problems where people are suffering? So that essentially is a issue.
So this is like the logic is wealth redistribution.
Exactly, that is the logic. But how we, the way we are presented, for example, you mentioned something like it's being retroactively applied.
Exactly.
You see, there are canons of taxation. There are certain principles that guide taxation. One of it under our own laws is that it is not expected to have the kind of effect that we are creating. So the people who made this profit could not have naturally anticipated it. They've closed their book, they've declared their profit, they've paid their taxes, and then you go back and say, come and give me this much out of all these things that I've done. So that in itself, in a way, contradicts some of these fundamental canons of taxes, of taxation. And I hope, because I've heard many people were saying, yes, these banks too, they make too much money and all that and all that. Don't forget that it is the banks today. We don't know which other industry. It might be tomorrow. So it is important for us to get the principle right. If we have to do it, when we do it, to ensure that it will not go the wrong way, that it will indeed be deployed such that it will bring relief to that other part of the rest of us who suffered by virtue of that policy that enriched the banks.
What is the supposition of this tax that the government is requiring from the bank? And by that I mean, the government wants us to believe that this is for the benefit, wealth distribution or wealth redistribution,
Correct.
The benefit of the people.
Correct.
But when I spoke to you about a few days ago about this very subject matter, there was a question which you raised, which honestly I think it really was something I had thought about, which is, why does the government want us to believe that this would be to the benefit of the people? I'm not sure that the people can count on one hand the benefits that the government has provided to them in the last 10 years.
Exactly. So there's a huge trust deficit. So people are asking questions about, okay, can government really be trusted to as that platform to redeploy or reallocate these resources that we're talking about? Or is it likely to go in the way of some of those other expenses of government that we hear about? Which would be quite unfortunate, that the money is taken from that sector, and instead of going into where it will make the right impact in the economy, it goes into some other frivolities or waste that government has been synonymous with. So for some people, what we must therefore be doing right now is, number one, asking government for something comprehensive, or how exactly you intend to get these taxes together, how exactly you intend to deploy it. How much is it going to be? How do you intend to deploy? There are certain information already flying around that About 50% of it is going into recurrent expenditure. So the question is, that recurrent expenditure, what will be the nature? Will it be able to impact the people, or it will just be government expenses?
As usual.
So if it is just government expenses, then it will not deliver the goods.
Yeah.
The other question is, shouldn't the private sector be involved or even anchor the deployment of a fund like this? To be sure that, look, after all, it is coming from the private sector. Government, as it were, there are issues around trust. So can we have a blend of government and the private sector sitting down to administer this fund? Because we're not so sure it will not go into wastage, repairing some residences of government officials, or
just before you raised that question, I even had a question which I'm grateful that you raised this aspect of the question. The question I wanted to ask you is, do the banks have the right, do they reserve the right to challenge this particular law by the CBN?
They can. If it has become the law of the land, how do you challenge the law? If the
can we call this a law, because it's in the bill? So I'm thinking
it's still a bill. It's not a law.
Exactly.
But if it becomes a law, then it becomes an issue. Unless that law is inconsistent with certain constitutional provision,
both in the Constitution and in the finance bill.
Yeah. So if those things are there, of course, you can approach the court and get the court to intervene in that matter. Banks will also be cautious about taking their regulator before the court. It's an unspoken rule. Nobody says you cannot do it, but you have to be careful how you approach it. Rather than take the legal route or route, they prefer to sit down with the regulator and reach an agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I can understand the politics of that statement. Yeah. Okay. Is this supposed to, because you know how it is where the banks are having to pay more, or let's categorize my statement, or the implication of my statement would be, say, expenses. So the banks pay taxes, they've closed their books, they've done all of that, and now the government springs up and says, well, we need a share of your profit for whatever reason, one of which is we created policies that benefited you or put you at an advantage and put some others at a disadvantage, and we are able to reallocate this
Correct.
wealth redistribution. I was wondering whether this has any implication on the banks that can affect the Nigerian bank user. I don't know if you pretty much grapple with my picture. Because if the banks are expending too much, then I think somehow they may go about it in a way that their losses or their cost are split both between bank and user.
It will affect them in some interesting ways. Number one, the banks are currently going through recapitalization exercise, which is already draining and is a very serious affair. As we're speaking about, the CBN has said, go and make up your capital to this much over the next 24 months. So they are in the middle of this, and the best thing will have been for them to be able to focus, and we can have those huge banks
recapitalize first. That's what you mean.
Yeah. But this one is a major distraction, really. And it is also a cost because it takes money away. The question is, how will this affect the capital market and the perception of investors? So investors who have seen, this huge profit, and this huge profit have been an attraction to them, are they now going to cut back on their interest by virtue of the fact that some of this money is not going to be taken away by government, and taken away by government in such a way that they cannot, a lot of them don't trust, a lot of the people don't trust the government when it comes to deploying resources to their benefit. So it's a challenging period for the banks, and I'm hoping that while this discussion is on, by the way, it's as if there were even no, maybe there was some opportunity, I'm not just aware of it.
Yeah.
When something as important as this, there should have been some open discussion, where the technical experts, tax people, members of public,
Yeah.
and the National Assembly can sit down and talk about the pros and cons of this thing and how best to approach it. But it seems as if it was in a hurry. It's already in the National Assembly. Maybe it has even passed through the second reading and the rest of it. So there's a hurry around it, and I worry that in the course of the hurry and rush,
Yeah.
we might miss out certain things that a proper discussion could have brought up. And then in the course of the implementation, we run into certain troubles or it creates certain opportunities for people to game the system.
99.3 Nigeria Info, the sunny side. If you have just tuned in, yes, you're welcome. And you're listening and have been listening to Bolahon Olojade, economic and financial analyst, helping us comprehend the very moving parts of the Nigerian economy, those that are of direct implications to you and those that may require some numerical explanation. And there is another news. I don't even know how to feel about this one, but I'm glad you're here. This is the fourth consecutive hike since February. Now, the CBN has increased the MPR by 50 basic points to 26.75%. Yeah. As a numbers person, there's the numerical aspect of this, but you have to simplify it so that the average Nigerian can understand what this increment means.
Well, what it means to them will be that interest rates, because the MPR, this interest rate that we're talking about, the monetary policy rate, is regarded as the benchmark rate. So it forms the basis for pricing loans by the banks or financial institutions. So if that rate goes up, then the rate at which they are willing to lend will also go up. So for now, people who have existing loans, some of them will start getting letters about an increment in the rate. That is what has, traditionally been the case. Then people who are trying to get a loan will probably have to pay more for the loan. I mean, there was a gentleman in my office sometimes last week. He came from one of the banks. He wanted to sell some of the services, some of the banking loans to me. He said, we do mortgage, we do this, we do that. I said, that's fine. What are the rates?
Yeah.
He said 37%. And I
wow. I needed to let that out.
Yes.
37%?
He said 37%. And I said 37%. Now, when you lend, aren't you scared yourself about lending to someone at 37%? So if you lend, let's say the person is an SME and he collects this loan at 37%, that is just finance cost. He still has his raw materials. If he does raw materials, he has other cost of operations to deal with. He has salaries to pay. By the time you put all these things together, aren't you creating a potential for bad loans? Because the guy, if he's desperate enough, might just take the money, and then by the time repayment is due or the first installment, maybe he will even manage to pay you the first installment when it is due. By the time it is getting to the second installment, things are already pretty bad. Maybe he even has more than 25 employees and he has to implement 70,000 minimum wage. So it starts to first of all start to lay off to see if he can cope. If he cannot cope, your repayment becomes a problem. So he doesn't meet his obligation. That is a potential for bad loan in your bank. So it's a serious matter. But does he have an option? That's another thing.
What do you mean, does he have an option?
Yes. Could the central bank have lowered the rate or what?
Good, because that's the next question. Is the central bank independent of the realities? Because one wonders whether the central bank fully comprehends what's even happening within the Nigerian economy and the entire no sir, it's mind-boggling, because you look at the inflation, you look at spending power, the power of your currency, you look at how standard of living is dropping, you look at consumer spending, you look at borrowing and paying back, you look at building the economy, you look at how that affects employment, you look at how that actually has a direct implication as to how you can build an economy today and sustain it tomorrow. But the CBN consistently, at least in the last few months, have increased interest rate by basic points. And so it leaves us wondering whether there is the CBN on one hand, and then on the other hand, there's
Yes,
Nigeria. Yeah, it looks weird.
Yeah, it looks weird, but I also don't envy the CBN at this time. Can you can imagine the number of things that you have listed just now? That is how those guys also have to think through all those things and see what they can balance. And it is a difficult task. Let's start from the fact that the CBN itself has a role in inflation moderation. So it wants to be able to bring down inflation. In the developed markets, okay, what are the tools that are available to CBN to be able to achieve this mandate? One of those, in fact, probably the most used tool, the most readily available tool, is the interest rate. It's available to the CBN. Now, in the developed market, where a lot of the money is within the financial system, when you raise interest the way we have been doing, it is possible to indeed have an effective impact on the inflation. And it has been used post-COVID. A lot of countries, not just Nigeria, ran into inflation problems. In the developed market, they deploy this instrumentality of rates, and it has worked. Some of them, their inflation rate has plateaued. For some of them, inflation has flipped to the other side. And they are released, they are already, providing a soft landing to those monetary tightening in those countries. But it is difficult and it is different in our country. And I think that is where the problem is. The complexion of our own inflation is different from what they are trying to solve. In our own case, you have a situation in which a lot of money is outside of the financial system in itself. So when you deploy those rates, the effect is not as strong as what it could be. So it's not curing the problem. Number two, you look at key drivers of that inflation figure, something like food, and you ask yourself, how exactly does increase in that rate solve the food problem? So we're solving a key problem. There's a disconnect.
You're agreeing with me at this point.
There's a disconnect between the tools we're using and the problem we're trying to solve.
Are we trying to solve a problem, or are we just doing work? Is the CBN just trying to do what the CBN knows how to do, which is apply monetary policy and let's all go to sleep?
Unfortunately, it cannot drop that rate now. The standard behavior is to wait till that inflation curve at least flattens. So if you look at the inflation rate they've been giving us, you can see that it is still going up. Month on month.
Yeah.
Although it could be argued that the rate of increase is declining. I don't know if you got what I'm trying to say.
It's not lost on me, but I want to see if I've seen that anywhere.
You can't see that because it is not so obvious, but it is right there. So if you take the inflation figure for the past 4 months and you look at the rate of increase, you will see that it is declining.
Okay.
Now, if it continues to decline, or if it is declining in significant amount, it means that at a point in time, the thing will stop to increase.
Has that ever happened in Nigeria?
Of course, inflation rate has flattened before and has gone in the other way before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has happened before. But is it just monetary policy that we do that?
Yeah.
My answer is no.
Okay, hold your thoughts. Lagos. This is 1 p.m. I can tell you really enjoyed this conversation because Nigeria is the one you see and then the Nigeria on paper with figures in it. It's 1 p.m. We're going to bring to you the news update. When we return, this conversation continues. We're going to be talking about this now new implemented minimum wage, the protest, and its implication on the Nigerian economy, short term and long term. We'll be right back. We're 99.3. This is Nigeria Info.
It's 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock.
The news update on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
99.3 Nigeria Info. This is the news update. The Nigeria Police says it will respond to the August 1 planned protest by some Nigerians in a most professional manner. Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbetokun stated this on Tuesday in Abuja during a meeting with strategic police managers consisting of officers from the rank of commissioners of police and above. Egbetokun says the meeting with the strategic police managers is to ensure to share intelligence from the various police commands in the country and also to analyze same for the security of the country. And according to him, the task of maintaining law and order during the protest will not be a challenge if protesters engage in peaceful protests. Meanwhile, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, believes the planned national protest is politically motivated. Speaking on Tuesday in Abuja, Wike claimed the planned protest was to divert the attention of Nigerians from the efforts made by President Tinubu's administration. But he appealed to Nigerians to be patient with the federal government, saying that modalities are being worked to bring succor to the masses. And the President, Bola Tinubu, is also promising Nigerians that measures are already in place to positively address their concerns. For this reason, the President sees no reason or cause for the proposed nationwide protest. He is appealing to the organizers to shelve the action. Minister of Information Mohammed Idris conveyed President Tinubu's appeal to journalists on Tuesday after a routine meeting with the President. Emphasizing that government listens to Nigerians, the Minister of Information said the administration was all-inclusive. That's the news update this hour. You are listening to The Sunny Side with Joyce on 99.3 Nigeria Info. I am Yvonne Alhaifo.
Quality talk.
Intelligent conversations.
Always interesting.
So engaging.
Sometimes even mind-boggling.
Nigeria Info. Ask everyone. Anyone.
99.3 Nigeria Info, the sunny side. My name is Joyce. We hold it to be worthy of note, and I have a guest with me this afternoon. We've been in conversation the last 30 minutes, and it's been as entertaining as it has also been informative. His name is Gbolahan Olojade. He is an economic and financial analyst. And it's so good to hear an expert opinion on what is happening in Nigeria from the numbers perspective, the monetary perspective of the economy of Nigeria. If you have struggled with understanding the position of the CBN, what the CBN is saying, what the government is doing, why Dangote, for example, is complaining, why we had the man DG on Nigeria Info speaking about industries collapsing. Well, here is a guest who's helping us see what the figures mean on paper. You get the picture of Nigeria on paper. You know, a few minutes ago, sir, I asked you whether Nigerians were going to suffer from this windfall 50% tax on banks by the federal government. I like your answer. But, you know, someone just tagged me to something saying that he read something on Naira Matrix, and the line he just sends to me, the first thing that will happen is that customers will bear the burden of the so-called windfall legislation. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to have to look at that later on.
Ordinarily, it should not happen.
Yeah.
Because the money that is going to be taxed is not profit from their normal operation. So banking operation is going on.
Yeah, but so
it is just something that came, unexpected, unplanned for, requires no effort on their own.
Okay.
Somebody just it's as if money dropped on their laps from heaven.
I can always have you back when I prove you wrong.
That they will try to recover all this money from the rest of us. Huh?
Exactly. Like the banks are probably just going to be like, okay, so how are we going to manage this? Okay, if our loss is $5, you split that. If our loss is $10, now that we have given the government 50%, you split it. So the Nigerian now would have to pay an additional $5 for every transaction. God alone knows what it's going to be.
I don't think the National Assembly is trying to push for 70% for,
the windfall.
There was a news around that yesterday.
That the National Assembly could push for 70% tax on that windfall 2023.
Yeah.
99.3 Nigeria Info. On the sunny side, if you thought it's interesting, you probably also think this is quite wild. But we'll continue the conversation. Our guest, Gbolahan Olojade, is helping us comprehend what's happening with the Nigerian economy. Okay, so now, sir, before the break, I like the fact that you were trying to help us comprehend this CBN monetary implication and how our cause for inflation appears to be multifaceted. Like our problems are so intertwined. And maybe when I use the word complex, I use it in a very simplistic manner because of the politics that it affects the cause of inflation. Because I think if things were done a lot more straightforwardly, then we would not necessarily be having the complexities of problems, which sometimes the government makes make appear as though it's too hard to fix the Nigerian problem. But really, it's just the politics that they're playing. Because, if you devalue your naira and it automatically, in a very short time, puts your country in a dire economic situation, it is, I would even say, economic 101. Or economics 101.
So you created the problem and then you're trying to fix it.
Exactly. You created the problem. So you should know how to undo that. I want to take you to the question of subsidy.
Okay.
Subsidy is gone. Every child has come to know that. They have now associated that phrase with now the suffering that they themselves maybe now feel as a consequence of being a child and your parents not being able to feed you properly. I don't know what your view or your economic view was before subsidy left. Now, many Nigerians, particularly those who are in pursuit of a protest, which is rumored to be kicking off on 1st of August, say that the least they expect from this government from that protest is to return the fuel price to where it was. So, do you think the idea of the removal of subsidy, because there's the government perspective, and then, of course, there's the larger, beyond the government perspective, which is the lives of common Nigerians. Do you think that removal, at this point, I mean, regardless of what you thought about, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, do you think it was good, an idea, now that we see the implication of it?
I don't think we were as prepared as I would have loved us to be when we removed it. That is number one. Number two is that we because we were not prepared, so all those things that would have been the natural reaction when you do that kind of a thing, we were not prepared to take care of those reactions. So the economy responded in a way. The response of the economy should have been predictable, and there should have been a solution to say, okay, when I do this scenario A, scenario B, scenario C will likely play out. If it is A that play out, this is how we will solve it. If it is B, this is how we will solve it. So all those thinking through the chain, I don't think it happened, number one. Number two is that we complicated that problem when we also have to now harmonize, like people like to say, devalue the naira. So those two policies require much more than they got before we executed them. The problem that let me also say though that those policies are good policies. We need to do them.
Okay.
Yes, but they require certain preparation, certain tact, certain waiting, certain timing for us to be able to do it. When you devalue your naira at a time when you have removed fuel subsidy, you are going to go back to that subsidy.
QED.
Because when you remove it, the price goes to a certain level, but we are talking of a product that you don't produce. You import it. So if you now devalue your naira, what happens is that because you import that product and your naira crashes, then you require more naira to buy a liter of that fuel from where you import it from. So the price of that commodity will continue to behave as your naira is behaving. So the subsidy that you remove, you will be back in that subsidy regime because your naira has lost its value. So as we are speaking, it is normal to just be able to do the numbers and say that we are back in a subsidy regime. The subsidy may not be paid to individual importer now. It might just be carried on the books of the government. But you see, you cannot have a product that costs this much. Naira was 400 naira, and then it's still costing that much when naira is 1,500. There's something not adding up right then.
Okay, so now this is more like a political question, but I'm going to ask you, peradventure, you'll have an economic answer to it.
Okay.
An analyst perspective to it. The last few days, I'm going to share with you what I saw yesterday. Fuel crisis, marketers project 700 billion naira monthly subsidy. This was yesterday. Fuel subsidy hit 700 billion naira monthly under Tinubu amid crisis. A day ago, $400 million monthly subsidy payment unsustainable. 2 hours ago, Channel Television, Dangote refinery success will end fuel subsidy. Ex-minister tells federal government. So somehow, subsidy is gone, and these conversations around subsidy imply that we're still paying subsidy.
Yes, of course.
Why are Nigerians buying fuel at 700 naira if we're still paying subsidy?
There's subsidy in that 700 naira. Because, yes, you see.
So what was the last administration doing that this administration did terribly? Because, I mean, we're buying fuel 200, less than 200. And now it's almost 1,000 naira.
And we were piling up debt. We were literally borrowing and using it to subsidize the food.
Yeah, but we're still borrowing because our debt now has more than tripled.
We're still borrowing, but I'm not sure that we are piling up the borrowing as fast as we were before. As a matter of fact, if we did not do something about subsidy, we probably would be belly up by now. Because the continuous obligation under that subsidy was becoming a problem. Meanwhile, we're back to that subsidy regime anyway. And can you see why there seems to be a desperation for money? We are desperate. We're in a desperate situation. So if we can't borrow, we must be able to look inside and find the money. Because even if it is just the timing, you just remove subsidy. Then on the other side, you devalue the naira at the same time. So let's say when you remove subsidy, your fuel landed at 400 naira. But at that 400 naira, your dollar was 500 naira to a naira. Then when you devalue, that your dollar went to 1,000. Definitely the 400 is no longer sustainable. It must go up. And as that dollar continued to appreciate against the naira, so will the price of that item continue to. Now, things could get a bit better under a domestic refining situation. Under a domestic refining situation, two things will happen. One, we can save on the money, on the dollars that we use to import those white products. So we don't have to import them because they are being produced at our backyard. So we save those effects. Number two is that if all those capacities are deployed, then we will produce more than we consume, and we can export and earn foreign exchange. So we conserve our own foreign exchange, then we also earn foreign exchange because we're producing this product. That is not to talk about even the employment implications and all the rest that it will put on the table. But as we speak, there is still no domestic refining.
I mean, then there's the politics between upstream, downstream association, Dangote, refineries working, not working, supply, cost.
They should go to the back end, fix that problem, and let there be fuel for Nigeria. The Dangote locally, domestically refined. The Dangote project has gone beyond the issue of one man, he wants to do monopoly. It has become a national project. It is important that it works and it works well. So rather than all those fighting in the media, the regulator should even go and sit down with the Dangote and walk through how that thing will come to operation, commercial operation. That is what we need to do. Apart from the fact that the government refineries, you know how much we've spent a whole lot of money over the past 2 years saying we are bringing them back to life. They should tell us some of the truth. Are these things not coming back to life again? If they're coming back to life, when? The Port Harcourt refinery, I think it was in first quarter, maybe January, that we were told that it has achieved mechanical completion. This is already July. When is the first liter of PMS going to be available commercially? Because those are also important to help allay the fear of monopoly that a lot of people have with the Dangote refinery. So if Dangote is putting 650 on the ground and the government is putting 445 on the ground, then it means that the monopoly is diluted. There is no major monopoly going on. And there is still Aradel, Watersmith, there are some other private initiative going on in that space. So what happened earlier in the week, or was it last week, is a very shameful thing. And they should just go back to behind the curtains, fix it, and then let Nigerians have fuel domestically produced.
If you were an investor from Switzerland,
Yeah.
Wall Street, the Big Apple,
Yeah.
and you look at Nigeria, would you really put your money here?
Very good question. I have there's an adage in Yoruba that says, I will translate it. but
Okay,
let me say it
sure,
first, yeah.
sure.
Ẹni tó tẹ etí aṣọ tiẹ̀ mọ́lẹ̀ á fa tẹlòmíì. When a man can march over his own clothes, he can tear the other person's clothes. If he can.
Oh, yeah. Like if he degrades himself,
Yeah.
he can further even
He
worse
will
degrade
do
the
worse
other
things
person.
to the other person. So, if I'm looking from the outside and I say, there's a man, there's a Nigerian, he has done a 20. I'm being asked to bring my money to come and invest, but there is a man who is a Nigerian. He has done a $20 billion investment. But see the kind of thing that is happening to him. Oh. So me that is coming from Switzerland, I should be the one to bring my money. If that is the way you treat the man that is a Nigerian. Those are the issues. So when we go out there and ask for investors to come to our country, to
Like
bring
the
their money to our
president
country,
practically had a world tour looking for investors.
But if that is how we're going to treat them, it will not all go well. So I'm delighted. I think the president probably waded in. I think they are trying to. You saw pictures about those meetings after that outburst. So hopefully
You're persuaded by pictures, really?
So hopefully they're trying to resolve it. $20 billion is no joke. In fact, individuals hardly do those kind of projects, especially in our part of the world. Those are government projects. $20 billion US. So if someone has done that, it's important that he succeeds.
Exactly.
It is
Like
important.
why are we people have accused Dangote of his monopolistic strategies, and he has made and so that's the tragedy of what's happening is maybe for the Nigerian public what can emerge from the conversation between Dangote and the government, because I really want to hear the gist. I saw a video yesterday. Dangote is like he's not afraid of anybody and he's really going to tell the and I'm like, bro, tell that story, because maybe if we have been judging you badly the last few years, maybe what you tell us can really help us see the inside politics happening. Because Dangote said he stopped, the whole wheat production thing because he was exporting the jobs because they had to import wheat. That's one. Because one of the videos, I think I shared a video of his on Monday, and that was a statement he made. And now he's saying that buying fuel is difficult, that they almost even force him to buy from the U.S. and pay $6 extra, I guess, on a liter or something for every
Maybe on a barrel.
on a barrel for the importation. And he's accusing some invisible hands and nameless faces that they're trying to stifle his success. And he says, if you think I'm a monopolist, then buy me out. At least his language appears that he is a fair tradesman. But now we don't know what the government is. So I think the bigger question here is, there is what the government is doing or not doing. There is the role the CBN is playing. There is where the Nigerian economy is today, and then there is the poverty of the Nigerian.
It's a whole lot that you have listed. I think people like Dangote, some people will say, he has become the alternative government, because what government cannot do, Dangote will do. And people who say, he's a monopolist, technically speaking, or strictly defining what a monopoly is not a monopolist. So when you come into the cement space, there's Dangote Cement, there's Lafarge Wapco, there is Bua Cement. When you come into the sugar, you see the same complexion. There are about 5 major players in the sugar space.
Is it possible that others may have had it difficult and maybe Dangote had it a lot more easy? Because the people who are accusing him of monopoly must know him, must know his trade. Must know the ropes of his trade.
One thing, observing it from a distance, is an extremely competitive person. So, so his competitors might have different ideas about who the person is.
There has to be an element of truth in there, right?
There
has to be.
But when it now comes to strict definition of a monopoly, those spaces I mentioned are not monopolies. You can't have 5 major players and say, One of the 5 is a monopolist.
Yeah, but you see, politics is politics is a trick game. So yeah, maybe we can't use the strict definition of a monopolist.
Maybe it's not a strict.
Maybe we'll use the political definition of a monopolist.
There are people who believe that he gets favor. But what I've also found out about the so-called favor with government is that most of those favors are also available to the other players that are in that space.
Now that Dangote is crying out, there was a part where he said that it's either they don't give him crude or they ask for humongous kickbacks. So those
are the dirty parts that I wish. I mean, you have a different position.
You wish you didn't hear it?
My own is that I'm not sure. I think it is too dirty for public washing. I think there are things that should be dealt with and keep our head sane. Let there be fuel let there be fuel and not coming to the open. Someone will say, oh, your fuel is bad. Your fuel is 1,600 ppm. Then the guy will say, oh no, my fuel is 85 ppm. Those kind of things are dirty.
Okay. Okay.
Solve the problem and let there be fuel.
Okay. I want to ask you about this minimum wage because I think that would pretty much that's a good way to wind up this conversation, because there is everything that you have told us about the Nigerian economy on paper, these figures that are moved, the CBN policies, and how it doesn't quite appear to be beneficial to the Nigerian directly. But you are saying that if inflation tanks, then maybe we can reshape the face of the economy. And
correct.
When do you think that could happen?
It will take a very long time.
People are dying.
If we're going the way we are going, in which we are employing only the monetary policies to drive the process, it will take a very long time. But if the fiscal should also join in the fight, in fact, the fiscal muscle could be bigger. Go into that space. If what you serve is just food, you will solve many problems. Because when that guy who used to use only 50% of his income on food, but is now using 90, if you solve his food problem, he goes back to 50. Now he has an additional 40 disposable income. He can consume more. Otherwise, you were speaking about manufacturers.
Yeah.
Their inventory will build up because the man who is supposed to buy them is already spending almost his entire income to eat. So where is he going to get the rest of the money to buy what they are producing?
Are you therefore saying that we can't go back to
change the fuel price?
Returning
we
back.
We can't.
No. You're saying we can't go back to subsidy is undone? That's what you're saying?
We
can't undo it?
190. No, I think it's going to be a major disaster to try to do it. It's going to be a major
What if government
disaster.
cut down spending? Because look at the government spending. I mean, that could fix subsidy just by them cutting it down.
I don't think it can fix subsidy.
It's okay.
What is the entire budget of National Assembly in a year, for example?
If they sold all those new cars,
it can't pay this. Look at the kind of figures we're reeling out about subsidy.
Okay.
Those things are huge. Okay. The protest is there too. Anyway,
we're off on a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about the protest and the economic implications of that, and this 70,000 naira that we don't know if we should clap or pray for the government. We're not even sure what our emotions should be. We're off on a break. We'll be right back. Our guest is Bolanho Olojede. You're listening to 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Number one station for talk.
99.3 Nigeria Info.
99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
The event, the tournament, the Nationals is coming. August 12 in Lagos. Witness the brightest minds from across the country in a battle of intellect and eloquence.
Have you ever wondered if controlling resources will be the key to dismantling?
Yes, a child has not been properly academically satisfied.
Has such person not also get experience, like your fifth point?
Experience fierce competition.
Peace cannot be kept by force. It's not because there's natural resources there.
Persuasive arguments.
I believe that through a balanced approach to religion and education.
Don't you think that such a person is old enough to decide?
and innovative thinking.
By 1985, the poverty level was below 46%. If they don't have money for tuition, are you saying they are not going to be accountable?
Whether you're a debater or a spectator, mark your calendars for August 12, 2024. I beg to differ. The Nationals in Lagos, Nigeria. Get ready to be part of history. For sponsorship and other inquiries, call Lagos Larry Griffin 0706.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk. 99.3 Nigeria